At the family party, I saw my husband, Ben, walk in holding hands with his mistress, Clara. A sharp pain went through my heart. Without thinking, I took a step forward, but two bodyguards next to him stopped me. Miss Olivia, please behave yourself. Given your situation, it's best to stay where you are. Their words were full of dislike and pity. I forced a bitter smile, turned around, and walked towards the exit of the party hall. Just as I reached the door, Ben had someone call me back. He stood tall in his expensive suit, but the way he looked at me was full of disrespect. Clara said, "She wants to get to know you. Stay and keep her company." As he spoke, he turned to look at Clara beside him, his eyes softening instantly. "But honestly, I don't understand why you'd be interested in someone like her." Clara gave him a sweet smile and leaned in to whisper in his ear. "Olivia has been with you for so long. She must know you very well." Before she could finish, Ben pulled her into his arms and kissed her on the lips. Clara pushed him away, her cheeks red. "Stop it. She's still here and everyone's watching." Ben looked coldly around the room. The guests immediately looked down, avoiding his eyes. Satisfied, he smirked at Clara, his voice gentle. "See? No one dares to look now." Clara rolled her eyes at him playfully, then turned to me with an innocent look. "Olivia, has Ben always been this bossy? He's just too much to handle." Watching her pretend to be innocent, I laughed quietly. I had known about these little games for a long time. Ben frowned and interrupted her, his voice cold. "Don't waste your breath on people like her. She's not even good enough to carry your shoes." I pressed my lips together, feeling everyone's eyes on me. To them, no matter how much Ben looked down on me, I was still his legal wife, the head of the company's legal department, a job so many people wanted. Every time Ben embarrassed me, their eyes showed both jealousy and fake sympathy. Human nature was truly strange. As the party started, Ben told me to take care of Clara. I looked at the woman's sweet, harmless smile and felt a chill. She was even more clever than I thought. In just a few months, she had been completely under her control. For a moment, I thought about warning him to be careful, but then I thought, would a man like Ben, so full of himself, ever listen? Under the bright lights in the middle of the ballroom, I stood in the corner watching them dance the first dance. Whispers from the crowd reached my ears clearly. "Oh my God, he actually let his mistress start the dance." Yeah, first time in 5 years, Olivia must be so embarrassed. I held my champagne glass tightly, my knuckles turning white. No matter how much Ben had disliked me before, he had at least pretended in public. But now, he didn't even care about that. Sure enough, as soon as the music ended, Ben eagerly led Clara onto the stage. He put his arm around her waist and looked down at the guests, his eyes full of arrogance. "I have an announcement to make tonight." I closed my eyes, already knowing what was coming. "From today onward, Clara will take over as the company's legal director." Then he turned to me, his eyes full of contempt. "Olivia, you can be her assistant. Maybe you'll finally learn how to behave properly." A few weak claps broke the silence, mixed with quiet talking. I stood still, my face showing nothing, even as the champagne glass in my hand broke. The talking around me grew louder. Everyone was wondering when I would finally leave. I stood in the shadows, watching as they gossiped about me like I was just entertainment. The embarrassment hurt more than any knife. 5 years of marriage, yet I had never once made Ben love me. As I looked at the two of them on stage, a tiredness I had never felt before washed over me. Watching them show their affection without shame, I suddenly realized how silly I must look. I had had enough. For the first time, the idea of leaving truly stayed in my mind. Before the party even ended, Ben left quietly with Clara, as expected. And as always, I was left behind to deal with everything, facing the stares, the whispers, the judgment. I was used to it by now. Every social event was the same. He left with his latest girlfriend, while I forced a smile and pretended nothing had happened. Taking a deep breath, I swallowed the bitter feeling in my throat. As the CEO's wife, I had to keep up appearances. I forced a professional smile as I said goodbye to the guests one by one. Just as I was about to leave, a gentle voice called out behind me, "Miss Olivia, may I have a moment of your time?" I looked up and immediately recognized the woman before me. It was Victoria, a famous jewelry designer. We found a quiet cafe to sit down. She got straight to the point. "Miss Olivia, would you consider coming back to jewelry design? We'd love to have you at our studio." Her unexpected offer surprised me. After a short pause, I replied, "I haven't designed anything in years." Victoria looked me in the eyes. "Your last piece made a big impression on me. I wanted to invite you back then, but you chose to leave the field." After a pause, she added, "Forgive me for being direct, but after what I saw at the party tonight, I think you might need a fresh start. Your talent shouldn't go to waste." I forced a bitter smile, saying nothing, but inside I was struggling. Victoria didn't rush me, simply waiting patiently for my answer. After a long moment, I lifted my head, my voice firm. "I accept. I just need some time to sort things out first." Victoria stood up and held out her hand. "I look forward to working with you." I shook her hand and smiled back. When I returned home and opened the door, what I saw made me feel sick. Ben stood in the living room wearing only a bathrobe. The red marks on his neck and the satisfied look on his face hurt me deeply. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, but the pain only made me feel more awake. "You're finally back," he said slowly and lazily. "Go change the sheets in that room and keep it down. Clara's taking a bath." His casual tone made me feel disgusted. 5 years of marriage, and he had never once treated me like a wife. To him, I wasn't even worth as much as a servant. Seeing me standing still, he frowned impatiently. "What are you standing there for? Get moving." I turned around and headed for my own bedroom. "Olivia, stop right there," he snapped from behind me. I turned back, my disgust almost overflowing. "Let the maids handle it. I'm tired." "You know I don't like outsiders touching my things," he said coldly. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, ugly laugh, because hidden within it was so much pain and sadness. "Haven't you always treated me like an outsider?" As I pushed open my bedroom door, I immediately heard flirtatious laughter coming from the living room. "Baby, how about a vacation, just the two of us?" Clara playfully pushed him away. "Olivia's back." Ben glanced at me, his eyes full of impatience. "The sheets and blankets?" But the moment he saw the suitcase in my hand, his expression darkened, a dangerous look flashing in his eyes. "What's the meaning of this?" I let out a cold laugh. The frustration and anger I had been holding in finally exploded. "Don't you hate me the most? Now that I'm leaving, you and Miss Clara can finally be together without hiding. Why insist on keeping me here as someone you dislike?" He suddenly stood up and grabbed my wrist with so much force that I gasped in pain. "Who do you think you are? Just a pathetic woman sold off in marriage, and now you dare act proud in front of me?" At that moment, I finally understood. He never saw me as a person, just a toy he owned. He could embarrass me however he wanted, but he would never let me leave his control like a child with an old toy. He might not like it anymore, but he still wouldn't let anyone else take it. That realization filled me with overwhelming hatred. 5 years ago, when I was still studying abroad, his family suddenly showed up at my door. They told me that if I married Ben, my younger sister's medical bills would be paid. At that time, my sister was very sick and needed surgery urgently. My parents, desperate to save her, had no choice but to agree to the marriage. For a family worth billions, 1.5 million was just pocket change. As for Ben, the only reason he married me was because his grandfather, Victor, had forced him to by threatening to take away his shares. When Victor was alive, Ben still kept his behavior somewhat in check. Now that Victor was gone, he had no reason to hold back. He tormented me without stopping, using me as someone to take his anger out on. I used to foolishly believe that if I was gentle enough, understanding enough, one day I could make him love me. I was wrong. So wrong. "This isn't over." His voice was ice cold. "You better behave yourself." I looked at him, feeling a calmness I had never felt before. The fear and submission I once had vanished completely, replaced by a chilling calm. Why should I keep putting up with this? If he wanted to play, then fine, we'd play. But this time, I wouldn't be the fool who let him walk all over me. As he spoke, Ben's hand moved down Clara's waist. The two of them were openly showing affection as if I didn't exist. His breathing became heavier, his long fingers teasingly touching the buttons of Clara's blouse. Clara blushed playfully, pushing him away. "Stop it, someone's watching." Ben glanced at me, scoffed, and muttered, "Mood killer." Then he pulled Clara into the bedroom, disappearing behind the door. Right before stepping inside, Clara turned back to give me a mocking smile. The door slammed shut. I picked up my suitcase, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't stand being here for another second. But just as I reached the entrance, two bodyguards blocked my way. "Sir, you can't leave without his permission." I laughed bitterly, but I had no choice but to let them take me back to that suffocating room. The next morning, Ben spoke with a cold expression. "Clara is officially starting today. You'll be responsible for showing her what to do." I pressed my lips together, about to argue, but he cut me off sharply. "You know what happens when you don't obey." Lowering my eyes, I murmured a quiet yes, missing the look of triumph in Clara's eyes. When I arrived at the office, I found my personal belongings packed into boxes and placed on a desk outside my old office. Ben's eyes landed on a photograph sitting on top of the pile. His eyebrows furrowed. "Where did you get this?" The photo showed him as a teenager wearing a school uniform, full of youthful energy. I answered without emotion. "Victor gave it to me." Clara picked up the photo, her eyes lighting up. "Can I have one?" I replied softly, "Take it." At my words, Ben's expression changed slightly. I used to treasure everything about him like a devoted fan. Every photo, every item he touched, even notes he scribbled without thinking, I collected them all carefully, afraid of losing even a single piece. He always made fun of me for it, saying I was a crazy stalker. Now looking back, I couldn't help but laugh at my own foolishness. I had treated someone who never loved me like he was my whole world. The things I once held dear now seemed like nothing more than sad proof of how much I had fooled myself. These days, I followed Clara around, watching as she shamelessly took over what used to be mine. The sympathetic looks from my coworkers felt like needles pricking my skin, as if I were some sad, discarded woman. "Baby, I made dinner reservations." Ben had been hanging around here every day lately. Clara pouted as she looked through documents. "But I haven't finished reading these yet." Ben waved his hand dismissively. "Let Olivia handle it. Giving you this director position was so we could spend more time together. She can do the work." A hint of displeasure flashed through Clara's eyes. "But I want to help you." That one sentence made Ben grin widely. Watching how much he loved her, I felt a pain in my chest. One sweet word from her could make him happy, yet after all these years, I couldn't even get a smile. "Let me learn so I can help you in the future," Clara whispered. Ben gently pinched her cheek. "No need to worry. Olivia's here." "But Olivia won't always be around." Ben's eyes turned cold. "She won't leave. A gold digger like her would love nothing more than to cling to me forever." "And what about me?" Clara blinked up at him, pretending to be innocent. Ben chuckled and pinched her delicate chin. "You, my little princess, just need to be spoiled by me." Clara was about to keep acting coy, but he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, silencing her. I lowered my head, swallowing the bitter taste in my mouth. In his eyes, I had only ever married him for his money. I still remember the first year of our marriage, when I tearfully told him I loved him, but he had only looked down at me with mocking dislike, his lips curling into a sneer. "A woman like you, obsessed with wealth, shouldn't dress up your greed as love." Lost in my thoughts, I didn't notice the flash of cruelty in Clara's eyes. After working late that night, I dragged my tired body out of the office building. As I stood by the side of the road waiting for a taxi, a van suddenly stopped quickly in front of me. Before I could even scream, a few strong men pulled me inside. I struggled desperately, my voice shaking with tears as I demanded to know who they were. A man wearing a mask spoke coldly. "You're taking a position that doesn't belong to you." The van eventually stopped in a lonely forest on the edge of the city. They dragged me out roughly and forced me to call Ben. On the 20th try, he finally answered. "What is it?" His voice was full of impatience. The man leading the group snarled, Ben, we have your wife. If you want her to live, prepare 20 million. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end before a cold chuckle came through. Olivia, what kind of game are you playing now? I take away your job and you fake a kidnapping? If it's real, go ahead and kill her. If it's fake, don't bother coming back. The line went dead. The leader froze for a moment before kicking me hard. Acting like you're Ben's wife, pathetic. You're not even worth 20 million. Before he could finish, the others surrounded me, beating and kicking me without stopping. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the complete sadness inside me. Late that night, when they were very drunk, I managed to free my tied-up feet and escape. I had no idea how long I ran, stumbling through the darkness until I finally fell. Just before I lost consciousness, I saw someone running towards me. When I opened my eyes again, the strong smell of cleaning fluid filled my nose. The nurse saw that I was awake and told me to contact my family. With shaking hands, I dialed the number I knew by heart. The moment he answered, I spoke first. "Let's get a divorce." He arrived faster than I expected. I looked at the perfectly dressed man before me, but my heart felt nothing. Ben's face was cold. "Olivia, you've been playing a lot of tricks lately. Seems like you're really unhappy with me." I replied calmly, "Then let's just end it." Ben's fist slammed into the cabinet beside the hospital bed. "You dare mention leaving me? Don't forget you were something I bought. You're not even worth more than a dog. In the nightstand drawer, there's a card with 2 million on it. That should be enough to pay you back." I turned my face away, my eyes full of disgust. Clara, in her sweet, delicate voice, chimed in, "Don't be mad. Feelings can't be forced. Olivia has her own thoughts. Besides, you still have me." She even leaned towards Ben as she spoke. Ben pushed her away and gave me a sharp glare. "Olivia, do you really want this?" I lifted my eyes to meet his, my gaze ice cold. "Yes, Ben, let's end this marriage." A chilling smile appeared on his lips. "Fine." He immediately called his lawyer and ordered him to bring the divorce papers over. "Make sure it states she leaves with nothing." He said every word clearly, his sharp gaze fixed on me, as if waiting for a reaction. But I showed no emotion, completely unmoved. When the papers arrived, I still showed no emotion. Ben, on the other hand, I saw a flash of panic in his eyes. I took the document, flipped to the last page, and signed my name without hesitation. When I handed it back, his face was so dark it looked like a storm was coming. "Olivia, remember this," he growled after signing, grabbing my collar. "When you regret this and come crawling back, I'll make sure you beg." I glanced at the signed divorce papers and smiled coldly. Seeing this, Ben kicked over a chair and stormed out. Clara followed closely behind, giving me a flirtatious look before leaving. I watched it all without feeling anything. I had known for a long time that Clara was not the harmless woman she pretended to be. She had been planning something with Ben for a while. And after last night, I was even more certain. The old me would have warned Ben to be careful, but now I just wanted to watch from the sidelines. Ever since Victor passed away, his family's business had become a target for many greedy people. Back then, I had promised the old man I would help Ben protect it, not just because I was grateful, but also to achieve my own goals. For 5 years, I gave everything to manage the company, making his position in the jewelry industry strong, and in return, all I got was endless embarrassment and coldness. The most ridiculous part was when he found out I was leaving the design world. He sneered. "You gave up your future just to get my money. What a waste. You sacrificed all these years for nothing." The moment Ben left, Victoria walked in with a contract. I quickly read through it. The terms were very generous. I looked at her questioningly. She smiled. "You deserve this. I believe you'll bring us something amazing." I picked up the pen, ready to sign, when a picture of Ben's angry face flashed in my mind. The thought of it gave me great satisfaction, but to be safe, I decided to be honest with Victoria. "There's something I should tell you first. I just divorced Ben. Given how mean he is, he's bound to cause trouble for me." Victoria chuckled and patted my shoulder. Don't worry about that. We have strong support. His family's influence is nothing to us. Hearing this, I felt completely at ease. So the rumors were true. The studio had a real power behind it. It seemed like I had made the right choice. I wouldn't have to live under Ben's control anymore. That night, I dreamed of Ben when he was 17. It was a stormy night. I had a big fight with my mother because I wanted to study jewelry design. She thought it wasn't a good career for me and wanted me to get a stable job after graduation. My younger sister was sick and needed money, and she was always the family's priority. That night, my mother said that if I insisted on studying jewelry design, I shouldn't bother coming home. With nowhere else to go, I walked back to school in the rain. That was when a boy in a black suit appeared in front of me. 2 bodyguards stood behind him holding umbrellas. He handed me one and spoke gently. Getting caught in the rain is romantic, but getting sick isn't. I was about to ask for his name when someone called out, "Ben!" He left in a hurry. That rainy night stayed in my memory ever since. So, when Victor asked if I was willing to marry Ben, I agreed without hesitation. But marriage turned out to be a nightmare I couldn't escape. During my hospital stay, Victoria personally brought me delicious meals every day. On the day I was discharged, I couldn't help but ask, "Does your studio always have such fancy meals? Every day is a new surprise." She chuckled. "These were specially prepared for you by Mr. William." I was even more confused. She gave me a mysterious smile. "You'll understand soon." After finishing the paperwork, we headed to the parking lot. In the distance, a limited edition Bentley was parked. I was just about to ask Victoria about it when a tall man stepped out of the car. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, looking effortlessly elegant. For some reason, my heart skipped a beat. The way he carried himself made it impossible to look away. "This is William, an investor in the studio," Victoria introduced the man beside her. He was dressed in a suit that showed off his perfect build, looking noble in every move he made. "I feel like I've seen you somewhere before," I asked softly. "I attended your design exhibition." A look of interest flashed in William's deep eyes, his voice low and attractive. His slender fingers tapped lightly on the steering wheel. "It's getting late. Let me drive you home to get your things." Seeing that I wanted to refuse, he pressed his thin lips together, his gaze sharp. "If you go back alone, Ben won't let you leave so easily." In the end, I got into his expensive Maybach worth millions. Sure enough, as soon as I stepped inside my old house, I was greeted by Ben's angry face. "Acting all high and mighty now, you finally realize you need me." His eyes were full of dislike. "Kneel and beg me, and maybe I'll—" "I'm just here to get my things," I interrupted him, biting my lip and forcing down the humiliation in my heart. Ben smirked as he looked me up and down as if waiting for me to lower myself and plead. I forced myself to stay calm and walked straight towards the bedroom, but he clearly had no intention of letting me go so easily. Several bodyguards immediately blocked my way. "What? Still acting? There's no one else here, so why?" "Olivia, are you done packing?" A commanding male voice suddenly interrupted. Ben's face instantly darkened. "William, what are you doing here?" "The door was open. I came to check on my person," William said, walking in with his long legs, giving off an undeniable sense of power. "Your person?" Ben's gaze turned meaningful as he looked at me. "Since when?" "Since the day you signed the divorce papers." William's lips curved into a dangerous smirk, his eyes cold as a knife. "I see," Ben sneered. "No wonder you were in such a hurry to divorce me. You found yourself a better man." He turned to me, his voice full of mockery. "Olivia, you really think he cares about you? He just wants to take what's mine." My eyes burned, but I kept my voice cold. "You think too highly of yourself." William let out a soft chuckle, a hint of danger in his gaze. Under his commanding presence, I quickly finished packing. Before leaving, I placed a bank card on the dining table. 2 million, not a penny less. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. At the door, we ran into Clara. William's sharp gaze lingered on her for a moment, something knowing flashing in his eyes. In the car, I couldn't help but ask if he knew Clara. His slender fingers tapped rhythmically on the steering wheel, his tone carrying a hint of coldness. Her family is one of Ben's company's competitors. I met her at a charity event before. Seems like Ben doesn't know her true identity. A meaningful look crossed William's face. He glanced at me. Do you want to tell Ben? Not interested, I chuckled. He and I are from two different worlds now. Earlier, I hesitated, my cheeks growing warm. You said I was yours. But actually, William suddenly reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face, his deep voice tinged with amusement. Spending too much time with Victoria has made you quite straightforward. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly explained, sorry, I didn't mean it that way. A faint smile flickered in his deep eyes, but he said nothing for the rest of the drive. The air was thick with an unspoken tension. After moving out, I settled into the apartment provided by the studio, throwing myself completely into my design work. It wasn't until the studio held an exhibition that I ran into Ben again. He arrived at the event with Clara on his arm. Upon seeing me alone, he immediately approached with a sneer. What, abandoned again? He looked down at me with disrespect. A woman like you, whose own parents didn't even want her, is destined to be alone forever. I'm the only one who would ever put up with you. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh and make fun of him. I had once given up my pride for this self-important man. Don't worry about me. I lifted my chin, my gaze cold. I'm doing just fine. He didn't believe me. His eyes looked me up and down critically. You look exhausted. Let me guess, working late trying to meet a deadline? This kind of fancy event isn't for someone like you. Don't think you're still the sought-after designer you once were. Just then, Victoria's bright voice echoed from the stage. Thank you all for coming today. I'm honored to introduce our studio's new chief designer, Olivia. Her addition will bring fresh, innovative ideas to our team. The room fell into an uproar. Everyone present was from the industry. They knew all about the history between Ben and me. Whispers spread through the crowd. Ben's eyes widened. You're their chief designer? I smiled slightly, my gaze steady and full of pride. He seemed to remember my reputation in the industry and was speechless for a moment. Clara's eyes flickered with jealousy, though she forced a congratulatory smile. Congrats, Olivia. You're really getting ahead. Hearing the bitterness in her voice, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Only then did I realize why William had insisted on holding this exhibition. He wasn't just helping me return to the design world, he was making a statement to everyone. Olivia was never defeated. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly respected again. I thought of those who once flattered me, only to turn their backs the moment my marriage with Ben fell apart. The world had laughed at me, calling me a discarded wife. When my marriage with Ben ended, those who had once tried to befriend me watched the show, but they never expected my comeback to be this successful. My first show back had already won me the Designer of the Year award. During that time, I often felt a gentle yet careful gaze following me. At the end of a party, Ben blocked me in the hotel lobby, his gaze burning into me, his expression more serious than ever before. Olivia, we need to talk. I looked at him coldly. The lawyers will handle everything. There's nothing left to say between us. Without giving him a chance to speak, I turned and walked away. From then on, I poured all my energy into preparing for the International Jewelry Design Competition. Days were spent choosing gemstones, sketching ideas, and working late into the night. William often stopped by the studio when I was working overtime, always bringing carefully prepared treats, sometimes homemade cookies, other times fresh fruit, never the same thing twice. Watching him stand by the floor-to-ceiling window brewing my favorite caramel macchiato, I couldn't help but feel a flutter in my chest. Victoria would tease me every time. A handsome, wealthy, and caring man. What are you waiting for? One night at a dinner party, she was slightly drunk and held my hand, whispering secretly, You know, William invested in our studio entirely because of you. Too bad you chose to leave back then. Her words made my heart tremble and my cheeks flushed. From then on, every time I met William's deep, gentle gaze, my heartbeat would quicken, but I was too shy to admit it. Every evening, he waited outside the studio, silently watching over me. A month later, on an ordinary evening, William called to tell me that something big had happened at Ben's company. Clara had bribed people inside and stolen the company's main technology. She even snuck into Ben's office at night and stole the latest research plans. In the video, Ben's face looked terrifyingly angry. He demanded to know Clara's intentions. Clara sneered and replied, "You're so naive and arrogant. I've been planning to get Olivia out of the picture. As long as she's here, I can't make a move. Thanks to you making things worse, I couldn't have done it without you." Ben remembered the time I was kidnapped, his voice rising in anger. "Did you plan that kidnapping?" Clara calmly admitted it, then added, "Olivia saw through everything a long time ago. She just couldn't be bothered to warn you. This is all your fault. She's long given up on you, and your company is doomed. This is the consequence for you and your family." I was curious why Clara hated his family so much. William explained to me that Clara's mother had once been a servant in his family. She had been punished by Ben's mother for a small mistake, having her leg broken. In the end, unable to bear the pain, she chose to end her life. After hearing this story, I felt a mix of emotions. On the other end of the phone, William paused before gently saying, "Don't let this get to you. Focus on preparing for the competition. I'll always be by your side." His deep voice warmed my heart, and I couldn't help but smile. 2 days later, the news was full of stories about Ben's company going bankrupt. I only glanced at the headline before putting my phone away. But as I walked towards the studio, I ran into Ben looking worn out. His eyes were bruised, and his suit was no longer neat. He looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. "Do you need something?" I asked plainly. He was silent for a long time before speaking. "Come have dinner with me. Anywhere you want to go." I laughed mockingly. "Do you even know where I like to go?" Ben was speechless. Looking at his messy appearance, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. The man who once stood so high had now fallen so far. He avoided my gaze, his voice awkward. "I admit I was wrong in the past, and I won't do that again. I'll cherish you from now on. There won't be anyone else involved." I raised an eyebrow and asked, "Have you been hurt somehow? Are you not thinking clearly?" His face darkened, and he looked like he was about to get angry, but then held back. "I really want to make it up to you. You've sacrificed so much for the company over the years. Can you forgive me this time?" I sneered. "Forgive you?" he said softly. "I can pay off your parents' debts so you don't have to worry about those things anymore." A cold look flashed in my eyes. "Don't even think about it. I've already had my lawyer prepare the divorce papers." He frowned. "You didn't hesitate when Grandpa first suggested this marriage, so why are you acting so ungrateful now?" I lifted my chin, my gaze sharp. "The neglect and hurt I endured these 5 years are your lessons for me. Now I'm making you pay back every bit of it." With that, I walked past him in my high heels and headed towards William, who had been waiting at a distance. I linked my arm with his, ready to leave. Ben stood frozen for a moment before smiling sadly and following my movements. From then on, Ben acted like a different person, giving me constant attention. Every morning, he sent fresh roses and had expensive items delivered to the studio nonstop, from limited edition bags to custom jewelry. I gave everything away to charity. "The company is a mess now. Without you, I can't go on," he said. "This house is so empty. The last servant is leaving. And I think I finally understand how you felt back then. Give me a chance. Let me be a good husband." Last night, I dreamt of the past and realized how unhappy I was. "I hope you can forgive me for what I did." Seeing this dramatic confession, I couldn't help but smirk. William walked over, his gaze sharp. "What's he saying now?" His voice was low. I handed him my phone. He took it and his brow furrowed. Then he snorted coldly, a hint of dislike flashing in his eyes. "Don't let his fake apologies fool you. He just wants someone to blame. Tell me you're not falling for his words." I smiled slightly and, in front of him, deleted all the messages with one click. Seeing this, the sadness in William's eyes disappeared, replaced by a smile. What I didn't expect was that Ben would show up next with my parents. Facing the three of them, I couldn't help but smile mockingly, a wave of disgust rising in my chest. My mom glanced at the designer uniform I was wearing, her eyes full of dislike. "You ungrateful daughter! You have a good marriage but throw it away to mess around with design?" A man as outstanding as Ben is too good for you, and yet you dare ask for a divorce. I responded coldly. He's been cheating for 5 years. My mom sneered. What do you know? Ben is so excellent, it's normal for him to have women around him. If you were capable, you should have found a way to keep his heart, not just focus on work all the time. I turned to my dad, but he avoided my gaze like a coward, acting like he didn't care. Knowing they were like this didn't make it any less painful when I saw it myself. Ben still tried to control the situation, a fake smile on his face. Olivia, I don't care who you're with now. If you're willing to come back, we can start over. Shut up, I interrupted harshly, my eyes full of disgust. Ben, you're disgusting. What does it matter that you brought them here? I don't care about them anymore. Ben froze, looking shocked. But they're your biological parents, I sneered, a mocking look in my eyes. They're not. With that, I turned and walked away. Behind me, my mom screamed hysterically. If you take one more step, you'll never have a place in this family again. I looked back, a smirk on my lips. That's exactly what I want. William, who had been quietly watching, walked over quickly, his eyes full of tenderness. I forced a smile, but my eyes stung with tears. He gently wiped away the tear from the corner of my eye, his voice soft. You don't need to fake a smile in front of me. I froze, lowering my head to wipe my eye with the back of my hand. To distract me, William brought up his own past, his voice gentle. Speaking of which, Ben and I were classmates in high school. One time I was waiting at the school gate and saw a girl soaked in rain. I lent her my umbrella. His words made my heart skip a beat, as if something had hit me. Was it a blue umbrella? William thought for a moment, his gaze soft. It should have been. As soon as he finished speaking, he understood something, and his eyes lit up with surprise. Could that girl have been you? I nodded slowly, my heart pounding. He looked at me with affection. That's fate. At that moment, the last bit of attachment in my heart vanished. So it wasn't Ben, but that boy from back then. I couldn't help but smile, my eyes slightly warm. 3 months later, I represented my studio at a world-class jewelry design competition. After fierce competition, I finally won the top prize. As I stood on the stage receiving the award, I looked down at the man whose eyes were shining with pride for me and gathered my courage. William, will you be my husband? He froze for a moment, then a smile full of affection spread across his face. I will. The entire room erupted into loud applause and cheers. A month later, we held a warm and simple wedding. Just as we were exchanging vows, Ben suddenly burst into the venue, dressed in a suit but looking worn out, his eyes red. Olivia, I've regretted it all these years. Please, give me another chance. I was wrong. Please don't marry someone else. Before I could respond, William had already coldly stepped in front of me, signaling to the security to escort him out with a look. How can we let someone like this ruin such a beautiful day? He turned and wrapped me in his arms, his eyes full of tenderness. Seeing him jealous, I couldn't help but rise on my tiptoes and gently kiss his lips. He chuckled softly. I finally brought my little princess home. On our wedding night, he pulled me into his arms, repeatedly asking where the nickname came from, his gaze soft and tender. In that moment, I realized someone had quietly been protecting me all these years.